Hello, Rachel.
Hello, Ryan.
How are you doing?
I've been having some weird dreams lately.
Anything else you want to tell me? Any other things? Just dreams?
Just dreams.
Anything in particular in your dreams that you want to share with the group?
Nothing I'm ready to share.
Nothing you're ready to share? Okay, so everyone, you know what it is. It's X-rated, not safe for work. Dreams about Marcus, who did not appear in this episode, thankfully.
Thankfully?
I'm not Team Marcus on this rewatch yet. He's very annoying. He's only been, here once? But, no, I'll give him a fair shot. I'll give him a fair shot. But
he's annoying, but I like him.
You like him. You love him with your
I find you annoying and I like
bosom.
You, so...
All right, so we are, I'm having dreams too, actually, which is weird because I don't remember my dreams.
No.
But my dreams are about this woman, this sexy, sexy woman, licking her lips, throwing her hair back and saying, yum, yum. I don't know why I've got that on the brain for some reason. They're an alien-like woman as well, maybe from Star Trek Discovery, but we'll get there. But we are Ryan and Rachel, your hosts, and we are rewatching and revisiting and reviewing episodes of a science fiction television show. Currently, we're looking at Babylon 5. So if you have not seen Babylon 5 before, we recommend that you give this show a watch, because we will be talking about it in depth and spoilers. And what an episode we have for you on this one, don't we, Rachel?
Oh, it's such a turd.
Oh, it's such a turd, would you?
Such a turd.
So you already give it a yum. Wow, Rachel's already handing out yums like lollipops these days.
It's been a streak of yums.
Oh, it's been a streak of yums all the way from here to there.
I'm really looking forward to the yum yum of exogenesis.
Oh, I can't wait to give Grey 17 is missing a yum yum.
Oh.
Do we even want to explain yum yum? Or should we just leave it for the yumlings to connect the dots on this? To have faith?
Yum yum.
Let's look at the DVD description for the episode we will be discussing today, which is episode 4, Passing Through Gethsemane. Gethsemane?
Season 3 is just...
Yeah, well, Rachel, you already said yum, so we already know what you think of season 3. But according to the DVD, it goes as such. Capital punishment has been replaced by the death of personality, a mind wipe that switches criminals' past consciousness with a new one. It's supposedly foolproof, but the plight of a B5 monk suggests otherwise. Wow, that kind of gives away a good amount of things. But also not too much. It's not saying everything, but it is giving away a good amount.
Yes. It's more than you expect to be divulged in a summary, which is like, an odd number of the DVD descriptions are like that, where it's like, oh, you just hand that to us. Thanks, JMS, for spoilering, but I guess you're assuming that anybody who has the DVDs has already watched the show?
Yeah, I didn't see a meanwhile in there, which is usual, so this is a special episode of Babylon 5, so I've got a special question for you. Who in this episode would have prayed Yum Yum? Not said it, but prayed. Doesn't matter if the character is or isn't religious.
The murderer.
The one that kills Brother Edward at the end of this?
Yep.
Wow, why? Why them?
I know, that's just what popped into my head.
Just popped in?
Yep.
It wasn't planted there by
I don't know.
By the actual YYP candidate, which is YumYumPrayer, the Centauri telepath.
Yeah.
He's praying to all the Centauri gods, yum yum, please help me, yum yum, and he's licking his lips while he prays. That guy, I've never seen an actor with such a smug face in B5. This is probably the smuggest faced man we've met thus far.
You want to reach through and like
beat him up.
Yes, but specifically, I want to give him like sort of like an uppercut, but one that like slips forward a little bit more, so it hits him on the bottom of the chin and then up the nose.
A real good uppercut.
Shatters his nose,
well,
so
Rachel,
he's like bleeding everywhere.
You'll learn those type of moves if you enter the Muay Do, but we've already looked at TKO. We are looking at Passing Through Gethsemane, which is a very interesting little episode of Babylon 5. We're taking a detour from the monumental big plots at play here to have a nice little character piece about a new character, about a one and done, and how their journey and their beliefs and their world views and everything going on with them kind of mirrors and reflects and bounces back to our main crew of characters. I am a fan of this. I have always been a fan. It really took me off guard when I first saw it, because when I was looking at it back in the day when I was a teenager, I wasn't expecting to have a nice little Catholic guilt trip in my Babylon 5, but there it was, and I enjoyed it. I was surprised at, and we'll get into it during our discussion even more so, but the main takeaway I had was not, it's Brad Dourif or any of that, or it was really, wow, I watched an episode of a science fiction show that had a really thoughtful, respectful, layered, nuanced take on a spiritual crisis. On spirituality, on faith, on religion. We had a religious episode of a science fiction show that wasn't condescending.
No, it wasn't. Isn't religion stupid? Or, oh, geez, we accidentally created a religion.
Or our main character is Jesus type of deal. It wasn't any of that. It wasn't, no offense, I don't mind Deep Space Nine, but Deep Space Nine, when it comes to religion, can be very much, those par wraiths are at it again, or prophet visions, and I feel like there are some, but that's getting into a different point. This is what I took away from it was, wow, I don't think I had really experienced too much in my science fiction television, this type of thoughtful look at the impact faith has. What about you? Do you remember what your experience was looking at this that first time round?
I remember just being off guard, but also in awe when we watched this for the first time, because like you mentioned, it comes after some really heavy hitters in a different sense, and we get this character study of some dude that we've never met before.
Which has not been a good sign in Babylon 5 in the past.
You can't do that! I've got to stay here. Please! I don't care what you do to me. Put me in jail. Make me clean the methane toilets. I don't care! I've got to stay on the station, or it's the end of the station, and every man and woman and child and alien on the station, just like all the others.
This is really different than those things that we've been offered up before.
This is different to Jinxo.
Yes.
This actually has something to deeply say about belief.
Yeah.
Things bigger than you.
Yeah, it does.
Jinxo! His name's Thomas. Did you remember that?
No.
Because it was like the saint, because he doubted. See, we've moved beyond that type of introspection and looking at religion to this one. But you were saying you were in awe of this, especially because, this is a character piece on a newfound member of this this is just a one and done thing, and Babylon 5 has not been very skilled at that for the most part. Usually it is cool villains that come in, but to have a guy that is basically the protagonist of an episode that will only be here for this episode has not been a real winner for you.
No. And it's like, the episode gained my trust fairly quickly, but I'd also remembered how it had gone before. So I was, like, in awe, but on edge and kind of suspicious, like, where is this going? What's going to happen with this? I was like, is this going to somehow link back to the Earth scandals that are happening? But no, it was just solid on its own.
It was solid on its own.
And it still is.
Oh, this episode still hits. Yeah, even more so. Even more so looking at it on a rewatch value, because there's obviously many things it's tying back to in the continuity of the series, and many things it's feeding forward, like the Valen stuff. But
yeah, that was
a big
Linnea being a cutie nerd,
being a geek. But the thematic tie-in, the thematic relevance is what really is staggering about this, because you can just look at this as a solitary episode. This is fluff. You could say this is filler. This is filler. This isn't progressing the main story. This isn't progressing our characters.
It in anywhere in this season.
You could miss it and not really be affected. But it is, you could put this on a skip list, but really it is about how you can have a side story that deeply explores one of the many themes of the series. If anything, this is a prime example to me of how Babylon 5 grapples with faith. If you had to ask me what is the episode of Babylon 5 that really delves into it, this is it.
Absolutely.
Edward! If you ask God to forgive your sins, He knows what they are, even if you've forgotten. Leave it in His hands.
Before we get into Brother Edward's plights, Lita Alexander has returned, Rachel. She is back. She said she would be.
Yeah.
Did you expect her to actually come back? Because we've had many people say, I'll be back, and then not come back.
On the first watch, I did. I had faith that Lita would return, because
she had already returned.
Yeah, she'd already come back once. And I just got the feeling that they weren't going to leave our crew without a telepath.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, she's coming back. I don't know what's going to happen with her, but she's coming back.
Well, do you want to lead us down what Lita is up to in this?
So Lita has come back from the Vorlon homeworld.
Amazing. I love her entrance. It's probably one of my favorite cold open stings in Babylon 5 is her warping out of the Vorlon ship and kind of hovering her way forward and being all, I'm back, I said I would be, and Kosh just standing behind Ivanova nodding like, yep, that's her. That's her. That's my girl. It's just so crazy. But yeah, she's returned to Babylon 5 and she went to the Vorlon homeworld.
Almost died in the process.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, what? How? She's only been gone a fucking month.
Yeah, a month or two for sure. And she says how much time she's been away for. And man, hearing about the Vorlon homeworld again, because for the longest
but also
time,
not hearing about it.
Well, that's the thing. You don't hear about it, but you do know about it even more. You're more intrigued on this mysterious thing that has been there since season 1, and we haven't touched it in a very long time, but it is always in the back of your brain because the Vorlons are a mystery that's always there. Everything about them, to how they look, how they act.
Gathering, even.
Well, as part of the gathering is what is their agenda to what is their homeworld like. And now we have a character that has gone there and she can't tell us anything, which I gotta ask, when you're watching B5, whether it is that first time or now, is that too much of a cock tease and frustration, the Vorlons in general, how Babylon 5 handles it? Because I know people I've watched it with have got genuinely annoyed and angered by how much they're withholding from the audience when it comes to Vorlons. How are you with it?
I've just accepted it. I don't particularly like it. Because I'm like, I just want more. I just want more. But I do appreciate the way that it's handled for the most part. I was just kind of chuckling to myself when Lita has the line about how, like, I can't tell you anything and the rest of it you wouldn't believe. And I'm like, oh, wouldn't I, JMS?
Wouldn't I?
You mean you don't fucking know?
Or we're not allowed to know. Or we can't shoot it, which is
we
also...
definitely don't have the budget for that.
We'll have to wait till season 5 to get some minor closure on this, for sure. I was flip-floppy on my initial watching because there was a part of me that thought, we're just not going to know. We're not going to really find out about the Vorlons. And a part of me knew that we were because we had been given so much. We had been given lore and we had been given Kosh's appearance and everyone questions these things about them within the narrative of the show. So I, the audience, can be allowed to do so. But I watched this in the time in which we had shit like Lost and Heroes, which didn't actually answer the questions. And if they did, they didn't do them in a satisfying way. And that was my concern.
They didn't do it justice.
That was my concern. What a fool I was. I love all of this stuff. I adore all of this stuff. This is also really beginning an avenue of the show that I really enjoy, which is Lita Alexander being this being the representative and aide for the Vorlons, whether it is for Kosh or the other Kosh, and she is this modified individual where at this point in the show we just know that she's been healed and has more everything going on, or like all of her injuries, whether they be minor or big, have gone away.
No more iron deficiency for her.
She's healthier than she's ever been, and
in the last 5 years.
Yeah, in the last 5 years. Well, that's all that Franklin has on her, I think.
Yeah.
Give him that. I mean, come on. But she is off the chain. We don't know too much, but what we do know is like they've adjusted her, and then by the end of the episode, we see that they've adjusted her with gills even, and this starts down that road of Lita Alexander is this super being that has been modified by the Vorlons, and I can't wait to see the story unfold as we go along, because this is my shit. I love this. I love Lita. I'm so glad that she's here. She's here to also tell us, Vorlon information, of course, but she's also here to tell us, like, she's going to be in the show, but she's going to be in and out of the show. Like she says, I'm going to be here, but most of the time I'm going to be off the station.
I'll be based out of Babylon 5. I don't live here.
I won't be in the main opening credits, but I'll be in the show enough for you to think of me as one of the main cast members for now.
I will definitely get more work than Warren Keffer.
Oh, everyone gets more work than Warren Keffer.
It's pretty easy.
It's pretty easy. It's pretty easy. But the most important thing I remember being a takeaway from this is Lita Alexander is no longer a part of the Psi Corps, and they're going to have a telepath on the station who doesn't have to abide by the rules.
Yeah.
Who
we got a rogue telepath on the regular rotation.
Who is being harbored and guarded by and protected by and aided by the Vorlons, who nobody messes with. Not even the Psi Corps would try and mess with the Vorlons. And oh man, I'm drooling right now because we have been watching, before this we had Talia. And I cannot tell you if it's just like, if Talia stayed, would it still be as fun as if Lita was here? Because if Talia stayed, Talia would have been able to go off the rules and be a badass and do horrendous things like Lita does, but I still don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much because of the Talia character herself being so lame for me, or if it is just we saw Talia restricted in her entire run of the show. Well, Lita, we never really got to see her be in the cycle except for the gathering.
Yeah.
She's always been on the run and she's always allowed to do shady shit on her own terms or for others.
Yes.
What do you think?
She's never been the idealized member of the Corps
No.
like Talia was. And it's hard for me to imagine, like, what it would be like if, you know, it had been different and if Talia was still here and Lita came back, or if
this was just Talia.
Yeah.
I find it, here's where I draw the line. Lita, even from the gathering, when she was a full Psi Corps member and she was doing the rules and explaining how they work, she would do shady shit.
Absolutely.
She would scan Kosh's mind. She would do these, even if they were for justifiable reasons, she always was more capable of bending the rules way more than Talia. Talia would keep secrets to herself and be in on dark stuff. Of course, I'm not saying she didn't break the rules, but...
like, the main example with Talia breaking the rules is...
the Underground Railroad.
Yeah.
And... yeah, even that, it's like people really pushed her to do that. While Lita, you didn't need to twist her arm as much. And so I find that more of a fascinating character to explore. And let's get into the Londo scene, because, again, this is why I like Lita Alexander. You have Londo come up to her and say, hey, we were friends. You didn't see that in the pilot because we never shared scenes together, but you can imply that we did after the pilot.
Yeah, sure. It's not like Londo is having a weird streak of being like, hey, we were friends once.
Everyone's his good dear friend. So that's also the thing of every friend is an insincere friend to Londo because every friend is a dear friend, which is obviously false. None of them were ever his friends. And if they were...
he was.
In ways,
Yes,
but he would also sell him out if need be. It was a friendship of convenience, of service, of dynamics, and that's gone now. They don't need that from one another. But
Paid him back, literally.
Let's talk about the Londo scene. Do you want to lay it out for us and what you think of it?
So, Londo's heading towards the tube and bumps into Lita. And he seizes that opportunity literally, like he keeps on grabbing her.
She doesn't like it.
No, she's just like, oh, this fucker, just everybody's in my way today. Like, she's so pissed off that everything is making her run late.
Yeah.
She's just like, I don't want to keep the ambassador waiting. Like, just get out of my way. But Londo doesn't take no for an answer in the way that Londo does.
Well, especially now.
Especially now because
he's an asshole.
He's used to having power and being able to control people around him.
Threaten them.
And have it work.
Oh, yeah. He's a bully.
And it doesn't work here. It doesn't work on Lita. And he doesn't walk away like, oh, fuck, that should have worked. Like, dang it. It's just like, oh, I played and it didn't work out.
Next time.
He has that true sort of gambler's attitude of, I'll make it back next round. Or I just need to play another hand and I'll get it.
Well, and the thrust is he wants to know what's on the Volon homeworld. He wants that information. I'd pay anything to spend an hour talking to you. And think back to season 1. we've had these exact scenes with him in season 1 where he wanted to know what was happening down on Epsilon 3, and he wanted to know what was happening with Deathwalker and the serum and everything, and he was told off from multiple characters, whether it was Ivanova, whether it was Sinclair, and he would just accept it. It would be kind of a funny scene. Remember when they were funny scenes where he would say, "Oh, I just wanted to know where we would stand."
The tone is so different.
The tone and the character is very different now. Where essentially,
like, that's part of what makes the tone so different, is because Londo is a different person.
He's a tyrant now
than he was, even though all of these traits were there.
Oh yeah,
but he has been changed by what he has done.
And Lita is changed as well. She's not going to take this. She threatens him, and he doesn't.
After he threatened her.
Oh, the acting between these two is phenomenal. Peter Jurasik is always great. He's always delivering it, but he starts out the scene funny and loud, talking and grabbing her and doing the Londo thing. He was like, "My good dear friend Lita," but goes into that mode we love so much from Peter Jurasik playing Londo, which is quiet. It's quiet when he threatens her with a Psy-Core. He's not even looking at her.
No,
he doesn't need to. He knows that this is going to stop her.
Oh, wow. You know, this little thing.
I'm sorry, Ambassador.
No, Londo, please.
But I'm really very late. If you will excuse me.
You have been to the Vorlon homeworld, haven't you? I would pay a great deal of money for an hour of your time to find out what you have seen there.
Oh.
Lita, I understand the Psy-Core is looking for you. I would hate very much for them to find you.
She has intense eyes, which comes in handy for being the telepathic character, because we fast forward and she enters the main plot where they have the Centauri telepath in the holding cell, and they put the bag on his head, and she has to do the "I'm using my telepathy" face.
The squinty face.
And she's improved so much with just that since The Gathering. And those eyes just piercing through, you believe it. You buy it. Even though there's always a level of silliness to it because it is a person just squinting really hard.
Yeah, I found it a bit
You're
funny.
never going to get over it's the Professor X thing where you might as well have them put the fingers to their temple type deal. But for what it is, she really steps it up to where I'm unnerved when she does the thing that I want her to do, which is I want her to be a badass who goes against the rules. When she probes that guy's mind and knocks him out, like he just falls unconscious, it puts a shiver down my spine and a little bit of me going, oh, this is why they have rules. This is why they have rules. This is why the Psy-Core exists. Because we already have crooked cops. Now imagine crooked cops that can just bring in a psychic and rip the information from your mind. That's scary. Yet the Psy-Core...
Garibaldi's wet dream.
Oh, Garibaldi's wet dream. Even though he hates telepaths, he doesn't like them. He
doesn't trust them.
He doesn't trust them. He told us that about Lita in The Gathering. He didn't trust her. It's like nothing wrong with her as a person, but she's a telepath. I don't trust those people.
But if they had a use... He still wouldn't trust them, but he would use them. Well,
that's his relationship with Lita throughout the whole entire show, right to the very end. He still doesn't see her here, especially as a person, more as a commodity or a resource, which is how most people see Lita in the series. And
poor Zach, he tries.
Poor Zach, he tries. Brother Edward is introduced in this episode, and it makes sense because we've only had one other episode with the monks. They in fact even have a scene where he talks to an Australian, an actual Australian.
I know, representation!
Who is an evil racist character and is actually played by an Australian. Like the first guy was, Malcolm was, but we'll get another Australian character later in the show.
The redemption of Babylon 5.
Yes.
That's the real reason we love season 3 so much.
Yeah, that's why we love it. A real Australian where they explain why the monks are here in case you missed that episode. I mean, unfair. If you missed Convictions, you would completely be thrown off by the opening of this episode. But I am fascinated to hear from you why this works in terms of this is a story where the lead character, the protagonist, is this random stranger. Because both of us agree, and I think most people do, this is a well-regarded episode, that it effectively captures your attention and your emotions towards this man.
It does. And obviously a giant part of that is the acting.
It's Brad Dourif.
And just in case you were unsure, he will be the spotlight. So we will dig deeper into that later.
Yeah.
But it's obviously also the writing. And it's the writing of Brother Edward himself. Also, the story that he's there to tell. Because it's very clear, very straightforward, and gives room to the thematic and spiritual explorations of the plot. And I also want to note in terms of the writing, because everybody around him is so solid.
Yes.
So he just slots in. Like that first scene, like he's playing off with Ivanova. I was like, we know Ivanova. We know what Ivanova's like.
We know how she feels about others.
Yes, we know how competitive Ivanova can be and the way that he's mirroring that. So we understand him a lot by contrasting him with Ivanova. And then the scene opens out to include Sheridan and Brother Theo, both characters that we know. So he's fitting into more of the world.
Yeah.
And we understand him within the context immediately because of the way that he's introduced. And they don't stop to be like, hey, it's Brother Edward. He joined the crew a week ago. And, you know, he's been a monk at this thing.
But they do tell us all of this information, but in really doled out, nice intervals.
Not all up front. Like, hey, here's the introduction to this episode. This is the story and the day in the life of these characters.
Yeah.
Not, oh, I'm turning on the TV because, you know, it's whatever night and I'm going to watch Babylon 5 and they're just booting up. It's like, no, they continue. They've had experiences, they've had lives, and they've had experiences in between this moment where this episode is starting and where we left them last episode.
Agreed.
Because it is a world, and it's a world that is happening regardless of whether you are watching it or not. And, you know, another example of that is that even though you don't touch on it in this episode, you can go, oh yeah, like I wonder what's happening on Narn right now, like the Resistance, or what's Jakar up to? Because you get the Londo thing, and the Londo thing always makes me, like, especially with his dreams, makes me think of his prophetic visions.
Yeah.
And is he having nightmares of his own death a lot lately? Right. So there's all of these layers of meaning that have been cultivated over time with this world, with these characters, with the events that have happened. And they just slot Brother Edward into all of that. Right.
The positioning of it is so important because it's early in the season, but not too early. So if this was right after, or like right in between, like big hitters, you would feel like this is a not a detour, but a pothole, like, ugh. And not to give too much away, but Exogenesis is that, where Exogenesis follows after a series of excellent episodes, and then Exogenesis, ugh, and then a series of excellent episodes afterwards. It stands out because of its position, because of its placing. A huge factor of this, and obviously, like you said, it comes down to writing is on par as usual with JMS's quality, where he puts everything into Brother Edward as a person, as a character. He gives him like proper level arc material and nuances, and Brad Dourif is giving, in my opinion, one of the best performances of his entire career. But a thing that is essential, is key to me, and it highlights when others try to do this and fail, whether it be Star Trek Discovery or previous episodes of Babylon 5, which is we get the time spent with the character. He isn't fighting for time from the main crew of characters, or the plot, or another character that's new shares by. Because think about Jinxer.
Paced.
Yeah.
It's paced well.
Like, think about Grail. Jinxo and David Warner's character are both taking up the spotlight, as well as Deuce the gangster, and you are getting too many elements where you're not spending enough time, while Edward, he's the only new element. We've already got Theo, he's pretty well realized, but we're making him more crystalline as we go along, and everybody else we already know, whether it's Delenn, whether it's Garibaldi, and so on and so forth, but we spend the whole episode with this man. That is so important because, again, Star Trek Discovery, for instance, they have this episode in season 4 where this guy refuses to leave this prison planet and he dies, and the episode treats it as this big, oh no, we've lost this important character. Yet he's in the episode for maybe 10 minutes. You don't care. It says you should care, but when Brother Edward dies at the end of this, I feel a genuine loss because I spent time with this man. I got to know the bright spots and the darker sides of him. I got to see his dreams, aspirations, his friendship, his camaraderie, his warmth, but also the things that tortured him, the things that challenged him, all within 45 minutes. I don't need 15 episodes to do this. And again, I always use that as an example of, I don't need 15 episodes of Brother Edward for this to pay off.
Nope.
Ariam in Star Trek Discovery was a background character, and then they gave her a whole episode and they killed her off, and we didn't feel a thing because guess what? In that episode, you barely spent time with her. Even though it was about her and she dies at the end of it, you didn't care because you didn't spend the time. Edward, we spend the time with him. We got to know his patterns. We got to know his behaviors. We got to know who he got on with and his views on spirituality. This is a character study because we actually study the character. I think that this is JMS hitting it at his best because he doesn't forget that this is called Babylon 5. So the crew of Babylon 5 are in this story, and they're all well implemented. Mm-hmm. Where you still get the feeling like Sheridan's the main character of the show. The events that have taken place have really challenged his worldview on what forgiveness is, and understanding, and tolerance, and justice. And you even get minorly how Garibaldi is, everything we know about Garibaldi pairs beautifully with what's going on with Brother Edward, because in his view of everything, we even get it in this with the scene with Delenn, where he's an eye for an eye type of guy. He's challenged because he's face to face with the results of the society they live in, and he feels sorrow for Brother Edward, who is somebody in his worldview should have just been killed, should not have been able to live and exist and give back to the world. Yet here he is. He managed to live and give back to him, Garibaldi. I mean, just that alone. I mean, what do you think about how this episode manages to balance being a character study of this person that will only exist here, whilst also still juggling the fact that this is an ensemble show where we follow a certain amount of characters in a given episode.
It's such a tightrope to walk, isn't it? Because you also have to fight against the audience's urge to want to spend time with the characters that they know and the characters that they like. And even throwing Lita in the mix of like, this is somebody that we haven't gotten to see in a while. And we know that there's lots of stuff going on with her.
We don't really know her.
No, but we don't really know her, but she's exciting and familiar. Whereas Brother Edward is completely new.
Yeah.
So it is interesting that they managed to balance all of those things. And I think a part of why it works, because would you agree that it does work?
Mm-hmm.
The balance of
Edward. It all works. This is a masterclass episode.
Yes. Like I said, it's a giant turd.
Yum.
Mm-hmm. It's so hard to articulate how well it works. Like the balance of the ensemble with the character study. Because it's just like you see those characters when they are needed for the story that's being told. And it doesn't chicken out. It doesn't try and rebrand what this episode is to make it more palatable for the week-to-week viewers. It's like, no, this is the story of Brother Edward and the title of the episode. That is what it's about.
Yeah. Through
and through. It doesn't try and distract from that or appease you. It tells the goddamn fucking story and it tells it well. So you don't give a shit that it's just like, oh, Sheridan's only in a couple of scenes, or Ivanova pops in for a little while, or you don't see fucking Marcus. You don't care because they don't need to be there all of the time for this story that's being told, and it's being told so well. You don't stop to think about, well, what if this was just like a different episode? Or what if they dropped this? I would be devastated if it's just like, if people said that they skipped this episode, honestly.
For 8 years, Brother Edward has been the best of us. He's been kind and gentle. He's given aid and comfort to anyone who's required it without hesitation or expectation. He is a good and decent man. I would hate for him to discover that at some earlier time in his life, he was something very different.
I can't believe it. Not him.
Neither can I. And I pray that I am wrong.
We often mention JMS's other work. What other series, what other pieces of things he's written for. And rarely do we ever mention the Twilight Zone. We have, but we rarely ever talk about how we see his work on the Twilight Zone being obvious to Babylon 5. But here, this is. His work on the Twilight Zone is very clear here in terms of the obvious, where you are exploring a ethical or morality story or play in a abstract fashion. So this is in a sci-fi world where this is a Twilight Zone episode where you have this seemingly good person and they have a haunting reveal, and it's how they deal with it and the moral ramifications, and it's basically looking at you and saying to you, the audience, how do you feel about this? What would you do? It challenges you, the viewer. That's a great thing about the Twilight Zone. But the thing that is also a skill that a Twilight Zone writer has to have is...
A good one.
Or any anthology writer has to have is making you care about these people because you only have a short amount of time to do it. So you have to bang these things in place quickly and efficiently and deeply. And this is where those skills he evidently picked up from other works like The Twilight Zone come into play so magnificently here. And again, JMS is always, in a lot of his scripts, doing what somebody like a Twilight Zone writer would do, which is exploring something that interests them and putting it into their script and analyzing it, digging into it, and using an analogy or a metaphor or a gimmick or a genre to do so. We see him do that all the time. But to me, there's always more of a distance in other B5 episodes to these things, or there's multiple things he's got his gun pointed at. But here, it's
laser focused.
Here you are looking at a writer struggling with how they feel about the things that we see explored here. We see a writer who clearly grew up in a Catholic background and had a lot of questions and didn't get a satisfying answer to those questions. And so this is him delving into that. This is him exploring that and bringing us along for the ride. And it is... I mean, as somebody who grew up Catholic myself, and you, Rachel, as somebody who grew up in a religious background as well, there are those times where even if you are minorly involved, like I was only minorly grew up Catholic, I didn't do too much, but even then there are those certain things as a child, as an adult, you question and you think, who can I turn to ask these things? And even if you do, maybe they don't have the satisfying answer, so you are left questioning. And that is what this episode is JMS was asking these questions about the soul, about sin, about redemption, about forgiveness, and he didn't get satisfying answers. And so this is him seeing if he can find them by writing them down and having characters debate about them. And I mean, how do you feel about just that? About JMS taking a time away from the shadow plot or Earth is bad to just vent, to just unleash all of this stuff that's been building up within him? Because it's so clear that's what this is. But is that a bad thing or not? Like, how do you feel about all of that?
I don't know. I don't know if I feel like it's that blatant. Like, it feel that he's Catholic, I mean. I feel like
really? Yeah. Okay.
Very, it's very much clear that it's focused on exploring the ideas of faith. Like, the episode is very upfront with that. Like, you open you have the establishing shot of the ship and then a fucking monk.
Mm.
Like, you're not tiptoeing around.
You even get alien faiths.
The thing, yes.
Like with Glenn.
Yeah, and that's part of, the whole thing of the Brotherhood is learning the many faces of God. And what does that look like and what does that mean?
Mm.
And you get it coming at lots of directions at that question. And it's struggling to, put the feeling into words.
Yeah. That's this episode in general, though, right? You watch it, and there's so much to talk about, philosophically, ideologically, spiritually, but after I watch it, I just have a lot of feelings, and I don't know how to put them into words, because it does leave you breathless.
It's evocative.
It's very evocative. Religion in science fiction, or religion in your media, is very off-putting to people. it can be a no-go. It could be something that people roll their eyes at, or they want it framed in a certain light. I've mentioned this before, as have you. We watch Star Trek, and Star Trek has a very strange relationship with religion. I don't want to simplify and say it hates it, or loves it. It has a very complicated relationship with religion, to say the least. But in a way, I come to certain science fiction things, like a Star Trek, like a Battlestar, to have a look at religion through a certain prism. And even Battlestar, for instance, is dealing with a lot of religious stuff in it, but there's always a distance because it's their sci-fi religion thing. They can make up whatever they like, and so it doesn't feel as real,
grounded,
or poignant to me. It's like, oh, it's cool in a lore sense. But Babylon 5 is saying, no, here's real religions, like Catholicism, like Judaism, and so on and so forth. Even, we have our alien ones as well that have many connections to real human religions and future religions like Franklin's. But I have had a real struggle with religion in science fiction because, I grew up with most of my life being like, I'm here for the science side, and I'm here for the scientist side.
And many shows are like that.
Religion's silly.
Just like, if you believe in science, you can't believe in religion. And B5 doesn't adopt that attitude for the majority of the time. There are people who are like that, but the show doesn't perpetuate that idea. It explores the meaning and function and realities of religion.
To put it in the most simplest of terms, Babylon 5 is an atheist who is still okay talking about religion in a respectful manner. Clearly, there's atheist views in this series, but it's not refuting the fact that culturally and historically speaking, religion has been essential to the human condition. And it would be foolish to think otherwise. And that's what is really refreshing about the series, is it's foolish to think otherwise. Many other sci-fi shows that I watch or science fiction media, there's a real detached level to religion. So I don't care whether it is they're looking down on it or it's this just kind of cold analytical thing to tell thematic stories with. That is the thing that I have a real struggle with. Like, I'm reading the Dune books right now, and they have a whole bunch of stuff about religion, but it's very cold.
Functional.
Yeah, it's very writerly. It doesn't feel like necessarily the human who wrote it, or whether Dune or others who are writing this actually have a deep connection with religion themselves. This is what I get from this is somebody who has a deep connection with religion and the tenets of it, and is wanting to go into depth with it. And that's what makes this one particularly inviting, because it isn't preaching to me. And it isn't lecturing me, and it isn't saying that religion's stupid or worthless and science is excellent. This isn't the power of maths, people,
It gives you the room to ruminate for yourself. Yeah. And it does that thing it's really hard to do, honestly, of you being like, I have my opinion, this character has their opinion, this character has theirs, and this character, doesn't know exactly where they stand at the moment. And all of those things are okay, and all of those things make sense. This episode establishes a nuance in its approach to religion that so much media does not manage and does not want to even bother trying to do. And this is a one-off episode about religion, and that kind of nuance comes through in lots of ideas in Babylon 5, which is partially why we love it so much. Why we come back to it is because those themes are there. They're nuanced. As you change as a person, and when you come back to the show, you see and appreciate different thematic implications, not just the strengths of the stories, which of course you do. We've noted that many times, but I don't know if we've acknowledged how our appreciation for the depth of the show when it hits its stride is.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's not every fucking episode, every fucking character, but when it hits its mark, it's amazing.
And another great thing is it doesn't boil it down to science versus faith. This isn't about that. A lot of faith-based stories within this genre will boil it down to that. Not all the time, but a good amount of time. Even Babylon 5 with episodes like Believers. But this is about justice or revenge, and it has this angle to it, this wrinkle, this lens over it that adds a different flavor to it, that makes it unique, makes it evocative and thought-provoking. A strength for me is it's a real religion. He's a Catholic. It's not distancing me
Sci-fi nonsense
with sci-fi crap where I don't like. Look, I love what Delenn has to say about spirituality and faith and the soul. It's really thoughtful. It makes me think about certain tenets of belief with that in mind as well. But there's a little bit of a distance because it's like, oh, that's an alien thing that JMS has, and he has an explanation for that because Jeff Sinclair went back in time and did this. Yeah. But there's this wonderful thing within this where we hear what motivates Brother Edward's faith. What is
what's the defining moment?
The defining moment for him? And in my real world life, we've lived with some, religious people. We've known them, and I've never been able to connect on why they are devout. What makes a person a devout follower of a religion? I am most likely, I think I align myself with agnostic, but I do have some struggles with that. And that conversation, that beautiful speech he has about this story from the Bible that has affected him and made him think about himself, I got it. Because in other pieces of media and in real life, people have done that, where they talk about like this holy text of this parable of this saying here, and I just don't get it. That's me. But here in this episode, I clicked. I get it. He explains it so well, and I am warm to it. And I think a part of my disconnection is I grew up in a Catholic environment where things were slightly changing. We had John Paul II, and then we had a different pope, and there was obviously over time things had kind of changed in terms of humanizing and making the text of the Bible and Jesus's tale more relatable to me as an individual. There was a period of time where, and certain people in my Catholic upbringing who are old school, where basically don't see Jesus as the man, see Jesus as the God figure. And that kind of started to change a bit. We started to humanize Jesus. We started to see him more as a person. And to have these kind of thoughts about Jesus, like this tale that he tells, like I've heard it, but not in the way that it's framed here.
I would say, for me, I've heard the story of Gethsemane, but I haven't felt the story. And that is what changes it. You feel the faith in him when he's talking about it.
He could have chosen to leave, to postpone the inevitable for a few hours or even days. He knew what would happen, but he chose to stay, to sacrifice himself, and thus atone for the sins of others. It's a very fragile human moment. And I've often thought about that night. And I honestly don't know if I would have had the courage to have stayed.
For narrative, it is a really great way of wrapping up and presenting to us a character who will suffer greatly but will be rewarded in a way that we may not understand, but that character does. And it's a great bow, a great decoration of self-sacrifice. This isn't just any other way of saying the character's going to sacrifice themselves at the end of this episode for a greater good. They're making it in a way where there's a weight to it because of there's a cultural context to it. And we talk about this a lot on Star Trek Discovery Talk, actually, where they use the vernacular and the wording and the legacy of faith to make things feel deeper than they are. Because inherently, at least for me and for many people, if you just
have a connection already. So
if you just add a holiness or a biblical or a general spiritualness to your thing, it makes it seem headier than it is. Like, if you just do that, and if you just say that in your thing, there's going to be a weight given to it that may not even be there. While here, it is there. For us, it is there. They tie it in, and they use what Discovery would use this trick, but far less nuanced and far emptier, where a character is self-sacrificing at the end, and they wrap it up with faith. Just like that episode, the examples where that prisoner sacrifices himself and dies because he has faith and justice and all of that. But it means nothing because they don't actually have any point of view. The writers have no point of view on what spirituality is and the nuances and the complexities of it. And I don't think about it all that often in my everyday life. But if a piece of media like this can challenge me and make me think about it, I think that is a bonus. Because that's a bonus of the episode, is it pitches to you. How do you feel about that? Would you do that? Rachel? Would you have the courage? Would you have the faith if you were in Jesus' place? Would you? And it's not even just, if you were Jesus, would you do this? It's just, would you be willing to sacrifice yourself over to a greater good knowing that it will destroy you?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Oh. No, that's not my answer.
Just a mild, yeah, I would do it, Ryan. You ready?
You?
I'd like to think I would.
Yeah. I think it's one of those tests in life that you do not, if you're being honest with yourself and you're not a fucking narcissist, you don't know until you're in the place. You don't know. Because if you have the certainty that you would, you are, like, you're not a person that I would trust, and that's not faith either.
Yeah. Yeah. Another aspect of having the titular passing through Gethsemane story to Brother Edward is you have to, as a writer, convincingly have the character do what he does. You have to, as a writer, make the audience believe in the internal logic of the episode that a guy would just let himself be killed. And it's very compelling, not just when he does get killed, but there's that tear-inducing conversation he has with Brother Theo through the bars where they look like a crucifix over his face.
The direction in this episode
is it's magnificent. Adam Nimoy, people. Adam Nimoy. He only directed like 2 episodes or a couple of episodes of the show, and boy, he just hits it out of the park here. There's that conversation Brother Edward has with Brother Theo in which he is struggling with it because he can't remember the sins he's committed. How can he be forgiven for them? Because the stain remains on the soul. just because you...
Very Catholic.
Very Catholic. Well, is it? I guess so. I mean, how do you view that just as an individual when he... Well, that's the part of the thing is, like, how do you view this? His complex is, and his guilt is, just because I have no memories of committing these atrocities and these sins doesn't mean that God will have forgotten and forgive me when I die. How can I be forgiven for something I don't know I should be forgiven for? How can I seek redemption? How can I seek salvation if I have no understanding or means to do so because they were taken away from me? I get it is very. I mean, as someone who grew up in a Catholic environment, that's very Catholic to me. But like
the necessity of knowing, listing penance, I think of as a very Catholic thing, because the way that I grew up was much more you have your relationship with God and it's between you and God, and also forgiving yourself as well for being imperfect, and that being part of the lesson of Jesus' sacrifice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I am very much on the side of Brother Theo of you don't need to list these things off. God knows. All you have to do is ask for forgiveness and it will be granted, because a core tenet of all of my religious upbringing was God is love.
This is the joy of the episode. It brings up so many questions, and then it makes you bring up more questions. Yes, God can forgive you, but how can you forgive yourself for things you know that you've done but you don't know?
Yeah.
And then here's another aspect that obviously is a thrust of the episode too. How can you be forgiven by the community, by the people around you, by the victims and their family? How can you be forgiven if you have no understanding that you did these things? Because you are not
it's not rehabilitation.
Right. You have not atoned. You have not changed. You have not accepted or grown because you had the knowledge of it removed from you. You were made an automaton for the government. But even removing that, it makes you, it's a struggle because yes, a part of me agrees with what Brother Theo says, especially growing up in my background, like what he says and what he does at the end where he does the official, reading of this and forgives him, and he uses his, he calls out the para, invested in me blood, all that kind of stuff. Like I get it, but Brother Edward makes some really compelling points though, where yes, that's good, but at the same time, how can anyone forgive me? How can these people forgive me? How can someone like you or Captain Sheridan or the viewer do it if I haven't actually changed? I have been programmed to be like this, but I'm still guilty of these horrible things. The blood is still on my hands. If even it makes it worse, if a telepath can just turn the key and make him remember all of these horrible crimes, that doesn't mean they went away. Right? It's
yeah. Because then we get into the it's so juicy. Because then you can get into the whole thing of what makes a person? Because he really believes, he's in the same body, he has the same soul. The sins attach themselves to both of those things. But it's also really hard to accept that they're both the same person, because they have a different name, they have a different personality, but they were both in this body.
And if you look at it from a religious angle, is Edward a creation and child of God? Or is it the killer, the one who was the real person?
Yeah. Because one was manufactured, but in both of the religions that we grew up in, you are made by God. You are designed and tested by God. There is a design there.
Yeah.
And is the mind wipe overstepping the bounds?
Yeah, and obviously justice versus revenge is the big debate that's had throughout this episode. Because people want justice, people want revenge, where do we blur the lines? And if we want to keep talking about it on a spiritual level, is justice of man, does that substitute, does that link up, does that erase the justice of the afterlife? That is a thing that's here as well, because it's easy to, I mean, many people do, like, and this episode has it too, it's like, do you conflate them? Do they blur together? Are they saying, like, where do you draw the line with it? Because many people, like Garibaldi, think that justice is he should be killed for his crimes. That is what the families think, and they do that. But as we know, murder is, is a sin. You're killing one of God's creations, but there are many people, many religions over history where, there's a justification for it and it's fine. And it's this nuanced thing. And the death of personality was introduced in season 1 as this scary idea that we never actually got to see. It was threatened and we heard a lot about it, but we never touched it again. And then we come back to it in season 3, and it is the whole episode is about how twisted it is. Is it more humane? Is it worse? What are your thoughts on the death of personality? Because one of the things we know about JMS is he is still unsure on where he falls on everything that he presents here when it comes to death of personality, the death penalty or life imprisonment stuff. Like, because each one of them is a shitty solution.
Yes. There is no optimal solution because we don't live in an optimal society. The justice system is the way that it is because it in name seeks redemption and rehabilitation of people who have broken the rules that society has established through government. Yeah. That's very much our experience.
We're not lawyers or cops.
But you don't agree.
Oh, I'm an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth kind of guy, Ambassador.
So you support a system that would leave everyone blind and toothless?
Not everyone. Just the bad guys.
But the thing that I'm left wondering about after watching this episode again for this episode is, well, isn't that kind of like you skip forward to the rehabilitated version of somebody? Like, it's skipping the hard work in between and going, they're fixed now. They get to be just a part of the world. That's what the mind wipe kind of works like.
Yeah, well, it's more efficient and quote unquote more humane.
Yes. And I don't think that I am comfortable saying that it's humane because it takes away somebody's humanity. And I don't feel like that's justifiable.
It removes free will.
Even in the most extreme circumstances, because it does take away somebody's free will, I can't accept that as being humane.
Killing them?
Also not humane.
Keeping them in prison for all their life?
More humane than the other two options, but still not perfect.
And that's the thing. It's an imperfect world where justice, too, isn't about just what you said about rehabilitation, redemption, and all that. There is a level of penance, and there is a level of those affected by the crimes of the perpetrator get a sense of satisfaction that they are being punished.
That's part of what goes into sentencing is the impact that it's had on people.
And you remove, when you do the mind wipe, you're removing that from most of the victims, most of the people affected.
Especially because they just, like, they turn it around super fucking fast.
Yeah.
Like, if there was, like, some even just more therapy work between the victims and the perpetrator before the mind wipe happens. But it's just like, nope.
I mean, aren't there those people that will never learn? Will never redeem?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what, like, it's very deliberate that the examples that they highlight in this episode of Death of Personality is serial murderers.
Yeah, with no shred of remorse and their arrogance. Death of Personality is terrifying. I think it's despicable. I don't like it. It removes free will. It's a scary power for the government to hold as well. I don't believe in the death penalty either. I think it's also wrong. It's also a power that I don't think the authority should have over us either. And there's also, and again, this is a statement that I will make that can also be countered by very easily, which is you kill a person or you reprogram a person, they don't learn anything. They didn't learn anything. They don't experience anything. It's taken away. But at the same time, it's like, if you reprogram them, you're giving back to society. That's the argument being made, is instead of keeping them in little cells, or
at the cost of the government,
or at the cost of your taxes, or killing them, you are giving back to society by having these bodies programmed to be good people who will be there.
Yes, serve the community.
Yeah. It's a fucked up world that Babylon 5 operates on, and this is just one of those wrinkles. And to end it off with all of this, because there's a lot, and we could go on for hours and hours and hours, and we would love to hear from everybody about what they get from this episode, about all of these things, but if Earth in Babylon 5 wasn't presented as the evil it is, and let's say it's presented like Star Trek is, this utopian, idealized version of society, and they still had this, how would you feel?
I would still feel uncomfortable. I think I still would, because it does take away free will, and that's something that is so much a fundamental human right. And I mean, like, human right as, like, anybody with consciousness in this sci-fi world. I just can't.
Yeah, I would like to think that I would think it's the same despicable, but it is heavily shaded because of how Earth has been presented in this series thus far. Earth has been presented as disgusting morally and reprehensible and evil in many ways, especially when it comes to authority. And I do think that I would stress less about it if it was like Star Trek, because Star Trek, especially in the original series, has a fucked up way of dealing with prisoners, and I don't stress about it. I don't stress about it because, that's just like a weird little detail that they have.
It's not a big deal.
It's not a big deal. and they don't focus on it all that much. But Babylon 5,
It
again,
just happens.
they don't focus on it that much here. This is like a one thing. We focus on this twice. It's very small.
Very small time, very small percentage of the overall show is on this.
And it stands out really, really well because
You can get so much out of it.
but also because Earth is so fundamentally flawed that this being presented is one of those where you go, of course.
You take away a man's life, memory, and payment for his crimes, and it's still not enough. Where does revenge end and justice begin? Forgiveness is a hard thing, isn't it, Theo?
I don't think anything can ever be more difficult.
We held off, and I gave the heads up pretty early on, but now it's time. It's time for the spotlight.
Want to explain Spotlight for those newcomers? No, we're not going to just put the entire movie Spotlight right here. We could. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? Huh? Copyright me? Like they would dare copyright the Michael Keaton classic Spotlight. Everyone loves that movie. I'm sure they'll just let me play the entirety of the movie's audio right here. Maybe. I'll finish right here. Spotlight! That's how he says it in the movie. Go on. So what is our Spotlight section?
Our spotlight section is where we choose to draw attention to a particular performer in each episode of Babylon 5. And in this particular episode, we are focusing in, shining that spotlight on
Brad Dourif.
as Brother Edward.
It has to be Brad Dourif. I mean, his performance is excellent. One of his career best performances.
It's so lived in from the drop. There is no sense of him finding this character. It's like, it's a whole character.
There's so much youthfulness to him, even though, he's not a young guy here. He's got some grey going on, but he has this energy to him where there's so much optimism and hope. And Brad Dourif plays lightness. Brad Dourif plays the sincere sweetness of this man and the unraveling of him, the breaking down of him, and the emotional range of just this performance alone just tells you what a great actor Brad Dourif is. He's crying, he's weeping,
For
he's
a
funny.
TV guest spot.
Wow.
Where there are characters that get a guest spot and give
nothing.
Actors that don't give a shit because it's 1 week for a paycheck and done. That is not the style that we see here.
Brad Dourif's always excellent. I've never been disappointed by him. I've been disappointed that shows or movies don't use him enough.
Like Voyager?
No, I love him in Voyager. But I fucking love him in Voyager.
You always want more.
Well,
you want more of him.
Well, because he's so
you
good.
always think
because
that he's in more episodes.
the character's really could have been
good.
Could have been used more. But before we get to the Voyager stuff, I just
circle back.
His performance is so layered, and as you say, he's a guest spot, and he puts it all in there, and he is just such a charming guy. Just the tears rolling down his face, the
vulnerability just shines through with such sincerity that I am just enraptured by him.
Oh yeah.
And I feel for him so much.
we talked about this a lot, especially when Bruce Boxleitner came in. There are certain actors with a reputation, a pedigree, a catalogue of work that elevates the performances of everybody else when they come in. Turhan Bey, great example.
Oh.
Bruce Boxleitner, when he first came on, when he first came on, we're used to it now. But David Warner back in season 1, there are these actors where you know that everybody steps it up a notch.
Yeah.
When they came on, and
They
Brad
level
Dourif.
it up.
Oh, Brad
for
Dourif.
Everybody
Brad
wants to
Dourif.
get up to their level.
I love Brother Theo in this episode, and I think the guy who plays him, we've already done a spotlight on him, is excellent as Theo, but I honestly think that this is his best performance as Theo. He is so great. Just do a mini spotlight on him for a second too. He's excellent here, and you could tell that he was having a ball playing off of Brad Dourif.
Oh, yeah.
Two A-grade professionals. These two gentlemen just chewing into this material without being seen chewy. And the scene between Theo and Edward, where Edward is telling Theo about what's going on, and you can see it both just on their faces. Everything that needs to be said is on their faces and not from the dialogue. You know Theo knows. You know he's aware. You know he's withholding information. He's obfuscating. He's trying to lead him here, and Edward isn't buying it, and all this. And it isn't just from pure dialogue. It is from the silence, from the expressions, from the body language, the movement of these two actors, and Brad Dourif is truly excellent. And I have known him for many roles, and I'm curious to hear your takes on this, but I know for some people out there, including some of my friends who watch this episode, is it takes them a little while to warm up to him, because it's Brad Dourif, who has a reputation, who's well known for playing freaks and evil people and Chucky and monsters and killers and Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings. He plays a lot of slimy, gross figures.
That he does.
But to me, I always forget that, because I always think of him as Billy from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, one of the sweetest characters in that movie, the one that you feel the most sorry for in that entire movie. I always think of Billy. It's one of the first things I think of him for. And so, yes, I've enjoyed him as Creeps. I enjoy the Chucky movies. I enjoy him in Voyager as like a fucking psychopath who you weirdly feel for as it goes along. But, and I've seen him, and Wormtongue was great. He was a slimy motherfucker. He's really good at that, but Deadwood, he's a little rough around the edges there, but he's an all right, he's one of the more sweet characters there too. But I can never remove that level of Billy. It's Billy. So that actually worked for me with this, where I never had to suspend my disbelief that this is a good guy, or any of the past or future work that Brad Dourif has affects me thinking that this is a sweet-natured character, because the one that does stand out for me was a sweet-natured character. So it really worked. How do you feel about that? And do you have that at all? What's your relationship with Brad Dourif?
I don't have a particularly strong relationship with him as an actor. When I looked through, I'm like, oh, I know that thing, but I haven't seen that thing a lot. Or, oh yeah, I've watched some of that show, but I don't think I've seen that episode that he's in. So this is probably the thing that I know him for. Because shocker, I haven't watched all of the Lord of the Rings movies.
What? No.
I haven't watched any Chucky movie.
Now that you are missing out on. He's excellent.
If this is what it takes to be human, then I would rather take my chances as a supernaturally possessed doll. It's less complicated.
You can't be serious.
As a heart attack. Think about it. What's so great about being human anyway? You get sick. You get old. You can't get it up anymore. I'm not looking forward to that.
his career, we could do a whole episode on just listing all the things he's done. He's worked with everyone. Werner Herzog, David Lynch, on and on it goes.
He has 179 credits on IMDb. And a lot of the time people say that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was his first film, but it actually wasn't. It came out the same year, but technically his first role was Dixie Dance Kings, which also came out in 1975.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, he just has... He works. He has many quotes about how he loves to work. Give him the work and he will do the work. And he's he can be choosy, but he isn't afraid to work in anything, like work for whatever, because sometimes
he's consistently
sometimes the work's cold and you just got to pick up whatever you get. And I understand that. He is a delight. Every time you see him pop up, you're in for a treat and a half, because he always delivers. He rarely phones it in, if ever. And he is such a strong, such a visually
distinct.
He's distinct. It's those eyes.
He has got such a distinctive look.
Hence he plays creeps.
Yes.
A lot, because he has these certain features, but it's those eyes. He is really great, and you saw it here. Switching the life on and off in those eyes. He can do it so well, where he's so exuberant and emotional and emotive in those eyes, and then he can just...
Such a cute,
turn it
puppy
off.
dog expression when he's, talking about his little figurines. So cute.
And then you get stuff like Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings, where he's just this little creep. He's this little gross man. And yeah, he's a legend. I would say that he's one of the best actors of all time, for sure. If I had to make a list, he would definitely be in there. He's definitely one of the greatest character actors of all time.
Yes.
And those are some of the best actors, so
yeah,
why not? He's my favorite guest star we've had on Babylon 5 thus far.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
In our entire rewatch, he's one of the greatest that we've had.
He's one of the greatest performers in Babylon 5, full stop.
Full stop. It speaks for itself. I love his daughter as well. She's a great actress too. She's been in a few things. I of course know her for Dirk Gently, that series where she was also just a freak. She's a freak. Now imagine being having the Brad Dourif thing, but you're a woman. Of course you're going to have to play a lot of freaks. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful. She knows. She plays a lot of freaks.
Knows.
She plays a lot of freaks. She's in some of the Chucky movies as well. So good for her. It's a family business. Have you got any interesting facts in particular?
Well, I just wanted to know he mostly does film with sporadic TV spots. So it feels really lucky that the stars aligned and he's Brother Edward.
In the 90s, he just was like, I'm going to do TV, because he did Voyager.
Yep.
As well, which...
I was a little bit after this. And do you want to go more into his character on Voyager? Because one thing I really want to say is I don't think that character would have
worked without it being Brad Dourif?
I especially where they go with him and what they do with that character.
And the eyes again. So he, in Voyager, plays a Betazoid who doesn't have the empathic abilities. So he's...
a sociopath.
Well, yeah, and in a way,
murderer.
in a way disabled as well. He's lost one. He doesn't have a sense, one of the key senses, and he has these black upon black eyes in that, which is weird because I always forget that Betazoids like Deanna Troi or Loxana Troi have black eyes. I guess it's because Marina Sirtis, she just has such dark eyes or like dark hair, that very Greek look that she has, that I didn't even think about that she just has black eyes. I never think about it. or that she has very, very dark eyes. But he has a black upon black eyes, and he's a guy who just kills another member of the Voyager crew because he's a killer, and he's no longer had to kill because they lost on the Delta Quadrant, and he's been having to withhold it, and he couldn't withhold it anymore, and he just killed someone.
Yep.
There's no rhyme or reason to it. He's just a killer. He's psychopathic, and they have to deal with it. He's the first crew member to be imprisoned for a crime, and he's excellent. I won't give away where his character goes, but him and Tuvok have to face off against each other because he's an emotionally damaged person. You could say he's lacking emotion, so they pair him up with Tuvok, who is a Vulcan who does not, quote-unquote, have emotions, or he actually, it's repression of emotions, and they have to mind meld and kind of understand each other, and again, two great actors playing off of each other.
And again, deals with the idea of redemption. And again, deals with the ideas of redemption and justice.
Free will
and
as well.
Growth in a very interesting way.
Yeah, and the nature of what it is to be, because a part of it is like, is he in control? Is there such thing for him? He's this lost being. Great stuff. Brad, man, you just...
So there are a few kind of fun facts, or like bio details. So like I mentioned, first role on film was 1975, when he was 25, I do believe. He was almost not an actor.
Oh, I don't like that. I'm glad that he stuck with it.
He, at a younger age, was more interested in becoming an artist. But because his mum did community theatre, that was like the big thing that apparently shifted him to be, I want to do acting. It was his mum just doing local community theatre.
And the thing I know about Brad is he's not into theatre. He's far more of a film
But he
guy.
has done a lot of theatre. He started out in theatre and also like working in community theatre, and then built his way kind of up and out. So even though he got a ridiculous amount of acclaim for Cuckoo, he went back to New York and worked a lot on stage stuff, but he also started teaching acting at that stage. And then it was over 10 years later, in 1988, where he decided to move to Hollywood. And that's when, after like a few years, you see the horror stuff coming in, and him adapting and really latching onto that, and obviously landing the role of Chucky,
which really was the career definer for him. Many people just know him as Chucky, which is a disservice. You know, there's something about actors of his era where you have people like Christian, you have people like Tim Curry, you have people like Brad Dourif, you have people like even David Warner, if we want to go there, just thinking of other actors, where there's this dignity and grace to them, but they aren't afraid to be absolutely batshit insane. There is no doubt, like, he has the capability of being restrained, like we see here, but they, like, him and Tim Curry, always so much fun, because you know that they have the ability and will most likely go off the chain like no other actor does.
This can go any which way.
Yeah.
He's a treasure. He's a treasure.
What if I had died, Theo, never knowing what I had been? How can I confess my sins to God if I don't even know what they are? The mind forgets, but the stain remains with the soul. The blood of innocent people is still on my hands. My memories are the creation of somebody else, and my soul is the soul of a killer, and everything that I have done has been a lie.
That's not true, Edward. You've helped people, cared for people.
It's not enough.
You've already given your rating, which was a yum. Do you want to take it back? Or are you going to stick with that?
It's a yum.
Yum, yum.
I give this episode a yum yum.
Yum, yum.
One of my favorites we've watched. It is a standout for me. It really hits.
Beautiful.
It really hits. It really hits. And where it's placed in the season is really nice because we're taking a nice little breath and having some heavy thoughts about things. And we're having heavy thoughts about things whilst also feeling like we're taking a little bit of detox and taking the foot off the pedal a bit. But now we're going to ramp up because we are going to be watching next week
on the next Babylon 5.
Episode 5, Voices of Authority, which according to the DVD goes as such. While Sheridan contends with a snooping Earth Force emissary, Ivanova takes on the daunting task of persuading the mysterious First Ones to join the struggle against the Shadows. Oh, that's an episode.
Yep.
That's an episode of the television series Babylon 5. Oh, Zog. Marcus will return.
Marcus will
next
return.
week.
And I mentioned him, but he wasn't in this episode, Ryan.
Who, Marcus?
Jakar.
Jakar wasn't here to say good eating to you.
But we are.
But we are here to say good eating to you.
But first.
And that you can follow us on all those social medias at YumYumPod or YumYumPodcast. You can email us at yumyumpod@gmail.com if you want to drop us a line, give us your thoughts and takes on the things we've discussed here or the episodes of Babylon 5 that you're re-watching or watching for the first time. We have our Patreon, in which a lot of stuff is happening over on Patreon. We're reviewing the X-Men movies. We're going through a lot of material over there, giving our thoughts on things, whether that be Duckman, whether it be Doctor Who, The Tick. You can just go over there and support us. You get to be a part of the group Discord and chat with your fellow Yumlings and with us. But that is it. Jakar was not here to say good eating to you. We are here to say it, but we don't need to say it because we already prayed it before the episode started.